lines, sorting through the media bias, exposing the propaganda, and challenging you to use your brain. It's time to tap into the truth.
Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed time to tap into the truth. Welcome to tonight's broadcast. Thanks for listening. Hope wherever you are, you're having a great evening. It is October the 8th, and we continue to limp through the government shutdown, which, of course, for most of us means not much has changed. Yes, that's right. We like to talk, we like to debate, we like to go on, we like to whine about how terrible our government is. My first recommendation and instinct, of course, is to then say, hey, go somewhere else and see how their government's going to do. But when it comes right down to it, we are facing some very serious ramifications of unchecked, unbridled power grabbing. It's been going on by both political parties because it's not about party affiliation. It's about a mindset. It's about people that are, quite honestly, better than the rest of us. We have our own bourgeois class in this country, ladies and gentlemen. The so-called progressives are very much interested in acquiring as much authority over you as they can. And they are very aggressively pushing to take more and more authority every single day. And again, it's not about party. Yes, sure, the Democrats are doing it now. But the Republicans were doing it before. And before that, well, the Democrats were doing it. And before that, well, the Republicans were doing it. The only difference is we've never seen it so brazen, so bold, so obvious, so right in front of our face. This ridiculous excuse of a government shutdown is a prime example of the ultimate failures of the people of this country to stand up and tell the government what they are and aren't going to do. And in case you don't realize it, that is your right as an American citizen. The founders, with the founding documents, created a government where the sovereignty of the nation, that means the power, that means the right to rule, the right to govern, remained in the hands of the people. They purposely tried to make it so that majorities wouldn't just run right over minorities, but at the same time, they intended for the government to be answerable to the people. That's part of why they're so scared of the Tea Party, folks. For those of you who listen to the mainstream media and listen to the current crop of Democratic morons that are in office, when they tell you about how extremist Tea Party folks are, it reminds me of a conversation I had just today with someone else, and talking about how naturally somebody dead center in the middle looks like they're an extremist on the right if your vantage point is from way off on the left. It's only when you censor yourself can you really see how far off center someone else really is. The Tea Party people aren't necessarily racist, and I make that assertion because there are bad apples in every group. If you have more than 5 people in a group, chances are you have somebody that's a bad apple. Someone that's a bad actor. Someone who's involved for reasons that are less than ideal. Now, Granted, you might be able to get up 10, maybe even 15 folks in your group without having one. But chances are, once you reach that magical 5 level, you probably have one. So yes, some Tea Party folks may very well be racist. But there are a whole heck of a lot of the so-called progressives that are certainly racist. And your first clue is how often you see them play the race card. When somebody immediately says to you, oh, you're a racist because you question a policy, because you say, what can we do? I don't know. Let's take voter registration, for example. How are we going to try and cut back on voter fraud? Well, the quickest, easiest way is to require a photo ID. Then you sit back and you take a look at who fights that idea. Because chances are, those are the people that have the most to gain by voter fraud. And if they say it's racist to require a photo ID, then you have to ask yourself, what is wrong in their head that they think minorities can't get a photo ID? That's something twisted in their mind. Because last time I checked, it might be an inconvenience for older Americans to go get a valid photo ID. But that is certainly not a function of their skin tone. It's not a function of their spiritual path. It's a function of the fact that it's harder for them to get around. But that's not voter suppression. That's fraudulent voter suppression. So the person that automatically assumes that it's racist to expect someone to have a photo ID hints to what's inside their heart and their mind. So tread lightly on the side of the folks that claim to be tolerant and fighting for you. Prime example, in case you missed it today, a number of Democratic congressmen were arrested today, actively participating in an act of civil disobedience. They were involved in the protest in D.C. in one of the many places that's supposed to be shut down because of the government shutdown. They were all Democrats, and they were all taking part in the approved and allowed protest for immigration reform. They do not want veterans of World War II to be able to freely walk upon an open-air plaza. But it's perfectly okay for a group of people that are in this country illegally to have a protest. They were given permission to have it. They were given the okay. Obama and his National Park Service Guard Brigade were told, stand down. It's okay to let these non-legal residents come onto the stage and walk about and meal around and hold their signs and tell us being American citizens, that somehow we owe them something because they're here. Not sure what the thought process is there. But didn't understand why Governor Brown in California signed a bill into law there now allowing illegal aliens. They're not immigrants. Immigration is a legal act. You cannot legally do an illegal action, so they are not illegal immigrants. They are not undocumented workers. They are illegal aliens. That's a legal definition. For those of you who aren't familiar with the concept, check it out. That would be one of your use your brain moments. So now it's legal for illegals to practice law in the state of California. What exactly do we owe them again? I mean, it sounds to me like they've been given a lot of opportunities. At any rate, these Democratic congressmen, including Charlie Rangel, by the way, somebody who probably should be in handcuffs for other reasons, were involved in the protest. But the protest wasn't enough, folks. The protest wasn't enough. They got involved with actually blocking traffic. Now, that goes outside of the preview. This is the very same type of actions that they condemn people on the right for even talking about. The trucker shutdown of the Beltway that is upcoming. They want to call these truckers terrorists. They want to call Ted Cruz terrorist. They want to call Mike Lee terrorist. All those guys are doing, Ted Cruz, Mike Lee, they're actually doing their job. Now, you don't have to agree with their political ideology. You don't have to agree with their choice of tactics, but they are still doing their job. And this is the way the founders designed our government to work. Or not work, as the case may be, because the idea was to create a certain amount of gridlock. The idea really was to slow things down so that, ideally, the only thing that would ever make it to the president's desk to get signed into law would be something that had been fully debated, fully discussed, compromised if need be, and would have been fully vetted, not just in front of the House and the Senate, but also to the American people. There would be time for people to understand all the ramifications so that there would not be any, quote, unintended consequences. And make no mistake, ladies and gentlemen, at this point in time, there's no such thing as an unintended consequence when it comes to something going on in D.C. These guys, despite how stupid they seem because of things they may say and actions they may take, and then their choice to pretend as if they had no idea something was going to happen. While they may not know a whole lot about what they're passing laws about, they are very adept at understanding legalese, and many laws are written specifically to create the loopholes or to create the kind of damage that they knew would be done. That brings us to Obamacare. There's literally a ton of horror stories already rolling out from the Obamacare sign-up situation. Got bad news today myself. The policy that I'm supposed to be able to keep, the one I like, the one that works, the one that wasn't necessarily cheap, but had a low enough deductible that it made it worthwhile, that was actually a good policy, well, it's jumping up another 30%, and by the 1st, we'll jump up an additional 50% past that. So, what's the point? If Obamacare was about helping people to better afford health care, there would have been steps taken to prevent that kind of thing from happening. But instead, it's been purposely designed so that insurance companies would have to charge these ridiculously high rates in order to actually offer the type of things that the law requires. It's about you, me, our friends and neighbors, the folks we know at church. It's about all of us looking at our new bills and saying, well, we've got to go to the exchanges. We've got to go to the government plans because we can't afford anything else. Only for those of you who've managed to spend half a day waiting to log on to the much vaunted website, managed to get a look at what these policies are going to be. For a lot of folks, this bronze policy is, well, it's expensive, for lack of a better word. Certainly not much better than what a lot of folks would have already been paying otherwise. In a lot of cases, more expensive for a low level of actual coverage with an extremely high deductible. Basically, the bronze package is useless for most Americans unless you have a catastrophic event. And while, of course, insurance does come in handy in those scenarios, how much benefit do you actually glean from this? For most people, none. That's the whole point of it being called insurance in the first place. It's not a handout. It's not a subsidy. It's insurance. You're purchasing backup in case you need it. That's what makes it perfectly okay to risk if you don't need it. And it's your choice. So you're forced into choosing something you can't possibly afford, something the government's going to offer, or what most likely a lot of folks are going to have to do. Just take the penalty. Pay the tax. I mean, if you qualify for the subsidy, you're still not coming out tax-free. What you were sold was a pig in a poke. And unfortunately, the poke's coming apart, and now you're getting a better look at the pig. They won't even release the numbers of how many people have signed up yet. They say because they don't have those numbers yet. I say because they're so freaking embarrassed that it's low. Why is it low? Because people get on this website, if they can get onto it, and they take a look around and they have no idea why they should have to spend $200, $300, $400 a month and have a deductible higher than what they would be paying if they were staying in the private sector. You literally can spend less than the bronze policy. If you have a family of 4 or more and you're taking the bronze coverage, you would spend less in the private sector, even with the raised rates, and get a much better level of protection with a much lower deductible in many cases. Could you find an exception? Sure, you could. Might take you a while. You know, it only takes about half a day to get onto the website, according to what most people are saying. Even the pro-Obama media groups who have been trying to demonstrate live on air, we're going to sign on to the website. Just, to show how easy and quickly it is. And then they find out, not so much. It's ridiculous. You had this one guy who immediately became a star. He was the guy, the immediate poster child. And as it turns out, not only did he not buy any insurance, but he had trouble even signing on to the site. And now it seems to have become kind of a big deal that the phony Obamacare enrollee has been invited to make an appearance at the State of the Union. Now, he's going to be a guest for a Texas congressman. I'm not certain what the whole point is, but Steve Stockman, who happens to be a Republican, has invited Chad Henderson, the teenager who became famous last week for making confusing claims about enrolling in Obamacare, to be his guest at the State of the Union address. The congressman also invited President Barack Obama to join Henderson for a photo opportunity. Chad Henderson is Obamacare personified. He pushed Obamacare on other people, but refused to buy it himself because he would pay more. He's practically a Democrat member of Congress. This was from Stockman's statement. I hope Chad will join me at the State of the Union address so Obama can point to someone who personifies his policies. Now, word is, at least at the moment, that Chad is leaning towards actually going, accepting the invitation. I mean, last week he told multiple news outlets, including Politico and the Washington Post, that he had successfully enrolled in Obamacare. And, of course, shortly after the outlets reported that they had finally found someone who had made it through the glitch-ridden enrollment process, it was soon revealed that Henderson used to volunteer for Obama advocacy groups organizing for action. And after that, it quickly became known that Henderson hadn't actually purchased an Obamacare plan, despite the reports to the contrary. He claims he said enroll, and news outlets assumed he meant purchased. Well, strictly speaking, what's the difference? Not a whole lot. If you enrolled in a plan, then haven't you signed up for it? Doesn't that mean you've made the purchase if you're going to pay? This is, once again, the so-called progressives, this time in the attempt to cover their embarrassment, playing with words, arguing semantics as opposed to substance. Never before has an extremist group in one party threatened default. That's semantics. Technically, you haven't seen any political group going around saying, oh, we're going to default on our bills. You have had several occasions where the debt ceiling has been used as a political pawn. They never said default in their threats, and you know why? For those of you who don't know, who don't understand, which also seems to include the majority of the media, the United States legally is required to pay its bill. We don't raise the debt ceiling. It doesn't mean that we default. We won't default unless the chief executive, that's the occupier, in case you're not familiar, whoever's supposed to be holding the office of president. See, it's his job to prioritize payments. Our government receives millions of dollars a day in payments. Literally. Millions of dollars a day. For most individuals, we tend to think of April 15th and then the folks paying late, that being the primary time. But they're collecting taxes from businesses, they're collecting fees, they're collecting a ton of things all the time. By law, Mr. Obama would be required to pay the debt first and then prioritize payments afterwards. The bottom line is there are still certain programs that he and his so-called progressive little friends just don't want to stop spending money on. It's the same argument that he makes about how a lot of people think when we raise the debt ceiling that it increases our debt. It doesn't. Technically, he's right. Raising the debt ceiling doesn't raise the debt. What it does is it allows us to raise the debt, which is exactly what will happen, because why do they need to raise the debt? To make payments. Because he wants to go borrow more money to pay it, instead of living within our means. You try to go to the store and continue to spend more money than you're bringing in, and see how long it takes for the store to say, Now, that's not defaulting. That's you having to reconfigure your budget. And while we're on the topic of budget, I've said it a million times, and I'll point it out again. We wouldn't have to worry about a clean CR coming out of the house. We wouldn't have to worry about the debt ceiling if these guys would just freaking do their first and primary job, which is pass an actual budget. We have not had a budget since Barack Hussein Obama first started occupying the White House. And he wants to talk about, I've tried to be fiscally restraintive. Bullcocky. He, in the times he's actually offered a budget, which is one of his constitutional requirements, for all the other reasons that you may or may not think he deserves to be impeached, that's one reason he does deserve to be impeached, is the fact that he has failed to live up to the constitutional requirements of his office. He has only gotten a few budgets offered, and even then, this last one that he offered wasn't on time. There is a constitutional deadline in place for him to offer the budget, so Congress has time to act. He's supposed to write up a budget. The House of Representatives is supposed to get first look at it, because all spending has to originate in the House. Now, they'll take that budget, they'll rework it, they'll move it over to the Senate. Not that this is the way it happens anymore. But the point being, when Barack has offered up a budget, he hasn't even gotten a single Democrat to vote in favor of it. That's how out of touch his budgets are. But in the meanwhile, this so-called government shutdown continues. And it's really got a lot of people aggravated, a lot of people upset. People who happen to work for the government and who've been furloughed, and then the folks who haven't been furloughed but are in the non-essential role. Now, they're very upset, and they well should be, because do you know why? Well, it's going to end up that they're going to get their money. That's already been settled. The President and the Senate refused to negotiate, and they refused to do piecemeal legislation. But when the House sent over that bill to pay the federal workers the back pay once the government kicks back up again, they passed that and signed that real quick. So much for no piecemeal. They definitely understand. They want to keep their employees happy. Because most likely those are the ones who have the most dirt on them and pose the biggest threat to their continuing power grab. No, you see, they took care of that rather quickly. They won't accept private donations to keep certain memorials open. To the contrary, during this shutdown, they have tried to close down private businesses that are close to federal land. They've tried to close the ocean. And just in case you're one of the few people that are hearing this bit of information for the first time, and I'm be surprised, because if you're listening to this show, you probably already know, but an 1,100 square mile stretch of ocean off the coast of Florida is technically off limits as of last Friday. No fishing is to be done, commercial or recreational. They're trying to close the ocean. But it's far worse than that. I don't know what's gotten into the park rangers. Park rangers used to be some of the coolest people on the planet. You'd get out, you go to these areas, and these folks would be able to tell you all kinds of helpful information. They could come save you if you got in trouble on the trail. These people chose a life of outdoors and helping people and being one with nature. They were cool. And don't get me wrong, there's still several that are, I have no doubt. But there's a lot of them that have fallen lockstep with these orders, and they're just taking these orders and doing what they've been told. And it's come out. There's been a few rangers come forward, and I doubt seriously they'll still have their jobs for much longer. And, quite honestly, I worry about their safety. They came out and they said that they have been ordered to make life as difficult as possible for anyone. And there's even a group in Yellowstone. The categorization has been Gestapo tactics. A Yellowstone tour guide accused the National Park Service of using Gestapo tactics while shutting down the park, after armed rangers locked a group of terrified senior citizens inside their hotel for many hours to prevent them from visiting nearby attractions. The Lawrence, Massachusetts Eagle Tribune reports that the rangers also prevented the group from taking pictures of wildlife and from stopping at a rest facility during their departure, forcing seniors to wait well over 2 hours before using the restroom. One individual in the group was quoted as saying, "We've become a country of fear, guns, and control." Also said that it was like they brought out the armed forces. They're talking about park rangers here, people. Armed park rangers who've been designated to guard parks, keep you out. Kept a group of seniors locked up in their hotel rooms. Under what authority do they do that? Under no authority can they do that. But you notice they're picking on senior citizens again. They really want to keep picking on a group of people they feel like won't push back. But what they really need to realize is that in cases like this, especially if you're talking about World War II veterans, there are plenty of non-senior citizens that will step up on their behalf because we appreciate, honor, and respect the sacrifices those people made so that we could live under what's left of freedom. These people faced horrors that most people today would simply run away from, or if they were forced to face it, would require who knows how much pharmaceutical aid and therapy to get through the day. These people did that to stop the tide of evil. And, if that was an isolated event, it would be one thing. But it's not. Obama's Park Service has kicked homeowners out of private homes on Lake Mead. Why isn't Harry Reid doing something about that? That's his territory, but he seems to be on board with it. It appears that private property rights are just the latest casualty in the shutdown, which was started by Harry Reid and his My Way or the Highway stand on the Obamacare funding. It's not the Democrats who are innocent in this, the way a lot of media folks would like to pretend. Some roughly 60 families have been kicked out of their privately owned homes on Lake Mead by the National Park Service as a result of the partial government shutdown. And it really is partial, folks. At the height, before they called back the Defense Department people today, the most was a 15% reduction. So this isn't even a shutdown. But they went up to the people that live in these homes. They paid for the homes. They have a lease on the property because the properties are still technically federal property, but they have one of those 99-year leases. So by rights, legally, the way the states and the federal government are supposed to look at it, it's as if it is private property. Now, when the 99 years are up, they or their descendants have the first dibs to renew the lease. The government doesn't have the right to cancel the lease unless the individuals are committing crimes of a felony level or higher. Not sure how much higher you get than felony, but that's the way it reads. Or the family doesn't want to continue the lease anymore. They let these people go gather personal belongings. They're not going to deny them access to their homes completely. They can go do the gathering of the items. They just can't spend the nights there or have barbecues during the day or basically anything else during the day. Unfortunately, overnight stays are not permitted until the budget is passed, says one of the recreational area spokespeople, a Christy Vanover. That's what she said to the local TV folks. Now, among the folks forced out of their homes by the Park Service was an elderly couple who has owned a home on the lake since the 1970s. Ralph and Joyce Spencer. They were forced to leave their homes so fast they forgot a number of essential items. The problem is that the private home owned by the Spencers is on federal land. In the meantime, the elderly couple is going to spend most of their time in the family ice cream store. And they'll be staying with nearby family members. Interesting point. During previous shutdowns, these people weren't forced to leave their homes. Several people there commented specifically about the Clinton administration and its shutdown. This is about bullying tactics. The military here, stateside, have been forced to go without spiritual guidance. The chaplains were all furloughed and were threatened with arrest even if they volunteered their time. Bill Maher, over the weekend, cracked jokes about the senior citizens, the World War II veterans, forcing their way onto their memorial after the barricades were put up, making the wisecrack. No one ever said they were the brightest generation, because several of them took pictures with Michelle Bachmann and Louis Gohmert, prominent Republican congressman. His slant, of course, was the fact that, just like most of the folks in the media, they want to blame the Republicans for the shutdown. It's not the Republicans' fault. The Republicans are taking a stand. Obamacare is bad for America. But Obama is bad for America. He's throwing a temper tantrum. That's what all these shutdowns are. Thank goodness people are waking up, though. And some of the governors in some of these states said, we are not going along with this crap, because several of these shutdowns that they've attempted have taken place not on federal government land, but on state-run properties. And in those cases, several of the governors have come up and said, no. They tried putting cones up on pullover areas on the state highways leading up to Mount Rushmore. Areas where you actually could get a clear view, but you were still several miles away. They tried putting cones to keep people from being able to pull over and just freaking look at the mountain or take pictures. Well, South Dakota's governor said no. And they have literally been going back and forth. He's sent people out to move them out of the way, get rid of the cones, and the feds, the Park Service, the folks that keep getting stuck with this job, keep having to go back out trying to put them out. They've closed commissaries on military bases all throughout the United States. But the Andrews Air Force Base golf course is remaining open. The gym that congressmen use in D.C., which is supposed to close during a shutdown, it's staying open. Why are they keeping the golf course? Obama says it's okay to leave the golf course open because it takes in some money from private sources, which that part is true, but it really doesn't get anywhere as close to enough to operate. It's still funded by the government. And our military, not only being picked on there, the commissary is how they pay for their groceries. They get to pay tax exempt in these places as a condition of the military service. It's like, well, we know we don't pay you enough, so here's another little break we're going to give you that average citizens don't get in exchange for your service. Those are closed. Our military men and women serving across seas had sporting events shut off at the networks. Obama's making sure he's getting to go play golf where he wants to go play golf. Meanwhile, places like, Mount Vernon, George Washington's home, completely private operated and privately funded. Literally, their money comes from independent private sources. No government taxpayer dollars to operate. They try and shut down their parking lot because that part is still on federal land. This is no government shutdown, and it's just a tactic, a ploy And the real truth is going to come out soon enough as far as what's really at stake when the debt ceiling doesn't get raised. Ladies and gentlemen, I am running long. That's tonight's show. Just keep watching the absurdity. And please stop drinking the Kool-Aid. It's time that we come together, left or right. It's time to come together and put an end to this tomfoolery. The chief executive's job is to protect American citizens from the pain, not try to make the pain worse. Don't take my word for it. Don't take their word for it. Use your brain and tap into the truth. Good night, everybody.